Hey everybody, Autumn here. If you are running an e-commerce business, you may not have thought about legal. You may not have really considered all the different protections or pitfalls that you may need to think about. But I'm here today with an episode all about e-commerce business. I want you to watch, I want you to listen if you're listening on the podcast and learn about what you need to do right from the get-go, what can maybe wait until a little bit later as you're building your business. And at the end, I want you to stick with me because I'm going to talk about a really important legal pitfall that I've actually been dealing with just today with a one-on-one client. And I want to make sure that you don't fall into this pitfall. All right, I'm lawyer Autumn Witt-Boyd. If you have not tuned in before, welcome. I'm glad to see you here. I am a lawyer. I am licensed to practice in Tennessee. Standard disclaimer, this is not legal advice. Please take everything in this podcast and video as information. If you have specific questions about your business, please reach out, whether it's to our firm or someone else, to make sure that you get your questions answered. All right, and I'm going to mention we have an amazing resource that's available with this episode. If you go to the show notes page on our website, it's awbfirm.com/podcast149. That'll be in the show notes too, so you can just click on it. We have our 10-step checklist for getting your business legally protected. So go check that out if you haven't already. I use it with every single one-on-one client. We were actually doing a legal roadmap session with a client earlier this week. We go through it every time we start working with a new client. So go grab that if you haven't already. All right, so if you're running an e-commerce business, what do you need to think about legally? Usually, since e-commerce businesses, you're selling one-to-one, but you often don't have a ton of interaction with your customers. It's not the same relationship that you might have if you, let's say, were a life coach or a graphic designer. But there are still legal things that you need to be careful about and think about. Now, you guys know that I am a contract enthusiast. I really think that contracts are the number one legal protection for every business. 99% of the issues that come up that we deal with that are problems are solved by looking at the contract. So we're going to start with contracts because they are the number one legal issue and legal protection for every business. So with e-commerce businesses, the way I see this show up early is often you are dealing with independent contractors. So maybe you are producing products, but you need some help with graphic design, or maybe you need some help with fulfillment or with actually putting the products together. Maybe you create a beautiful design, but you need someone to print it on a t-shirt or a coffee mug for you. So there's all kinds of ways that we see e-commerce businesses working with independent contractors. And a mistake that I see a lot of these businesses make is not using contracts. So even if it's just a small order, making sure that you're clear in writing. It doesn't have to be something super formal if you're just, let's say, having a sample run of a t-shirt, or you're ordering a small batch of something. But as you are, let's say, forming relationships with vendors or hiring contractors, especially if they're doing creative work in your business, it's super important to make sure that that is put in writing to protect both of you. So the person you're hiring probably wants to make sure they're going to get paid. They want to know, how they're going to work with you, what to expect. And you want to make sure that you are getting what you bargained for, that everybody's clear, everyone's on the same page. I was talking about this with another client this week, and they said, oh, so contracts are really not for a lawsuit. They're really just to help everybody be on the same page and make sure expectations are set. I was like, yes, that is the reason that we rely on contracts. Hopefully you will never be in a lawsuit, or hopefully you will never have a dispute. But if you do, you come back to the contract and hopefully everything is set out very clearly. But what a good contract really does is hopefully it avoids you having a dispute, because if there's a question, if something comes up, you just go back and look at the contract. It's clearly stated, and you can, both agree on how we're going to move forward. So having a contract with your independent contractors is really critical. I mentioned if you're hiring contractors for creative services for your business, so let's say maybe you want to sell t-shirts, but you're not an amazing artist. So you hire someone to do a design for a t-shirt. Under our U.S. copyright law, and this is the opposite of what most people think, if you hire a contractor, they actually own all the rights in whatever they're creating for you. So it's totally backwards to what most of us would assume, because you're paying them. You're probably telling them. I'll give an example. I have a friend and client, Emily Thompson, who runs Almanac Supply Co. she sells these really cute shirts and scarves and with a drawing of a gnome. Now, I actually don't know who created that. It could have been Emily or her husband or partner, David. But if they hired an artist to create that drawing of the gnome, which is kind of like their little mascot for their business, she would want to make sure that she had an agreement in writing, either giving her permission to use that drawing in all the ways that she wanted to use it, or ideally, this is what I would prefer, transferring the rights, transferring all the copyrights in that drawing so that she could, have full ownership and do whatever she wanted with it. So again, if you're hiring contractors to create creative things for your e-commerce business, they own all the rights. So we want to change that in our contract so that you either own the rights or you have permission to do whatever you want to do with them. So that's one really important reason to use a contract. When you think an email would probably be fine. No, we have to have it in a contract if you are transferring copyrights. It has to be signed by both people if you're transferring copyrights. That's a requirement in our copyright law. Okay, so what are some other contracts that may come into play with an e-commerce business? A lot of my clients are in the stationery business and they run wholesale businesses. So they may print up beautiful note cards and then they sell them at wholesale to, let's say, maybe a local stationery shop or a gift shop who is going to actually sell them in their store. So if you are doing wholesale as part of your products, you're selling to other people who will then sell them to an end buyer. You want to make sure you have clear wholesale terms. Now, this can be pretty simple depending on how complicated your wholesale relationships are. It can be just kind of a terms and conditions that you include when you write up the order. But there are some things that you may want to think about and you want to have in writing. Things like, when is payment due? Is it upon purchase or is it more of a consignment? So they don't actually pay you until they sell the item. Do you give them 30 days to pay you, or is payment due, before you ship them? Are there any rules around returns? So let's say they don't sell your product. Will you accept it back? What happens if the goods arrive damaged? So, just think about all the different issues that might come up with a wholesale relationship. And you want to have those either in a contract or in, some clear terms and conditions that they're agreeing to when they place an order with you. So a wholesale contract is the next thing I want you to think about for your e-commerce business if you are doing wholesale. Another area I see this come up is licensing. So this is a little more of an advanced topic, but for e-commerce businesses, and I'll give my guest on next week's podcast, Vivian Kay, I'll use her as an example because she has come up with this phrase that she has trademarked, and we'll talk about, she's registered as a trademark. We'll talk about trademarks more in just a minute. But she has this phrase, what would Chad do? And you're going to have to listen to next week's episode to learn more about what that means. But she has actually, because it's her phrase, but she is working with other people who are in her community to actually produce products using her trademark. She is licensing her trademark out to other people to produce products with it. So she's got tote bags, I think she's got stickers and maybe lollipops that have what would Chad do, her trademarked phrase on them. So anytime you're granting someone else permission to use your either designs, a phrase that you've trademarked, anything like that. And I see this again with a lot of my stationery clients who are really brilliant designers. They create beautiful art. They might work with another company who wants to produce goods with their designs on them. And that's usually a licensing relationship. So a license just basically means you're giving someone else permission to use your work. Usually there's a payment, either a royalty or a flat fee. There's lots of different ways these can be set up. But anytime you are doing that, even if it's something very friendly, I want you to think about putting it in writing in a contract, in a license, so everybody's very clear again about payment, about cancellation, about who owns what. So super, super important to make sure that your license terms are very clear. The last contract I want to mention is sometimes my e-commerce clients, and we talk about this with Vivian Kay as well next week, will do collaborations with other businesses. So an example Vivian gave was she had her products put in a subscription box. So you may have seen these. There's cosmetics ones, there's ones for books, there's a million different kinds, candles, body products. But if you are putting some of your products into a subscription box, that can be a very complicated arrangement. I've negotiated some of those contracts for other clients. And so we want to be very clear. You want to make sure you know what your responsibilities are, what the subscription company's responsibilities are, kind of who's doing what, how are you being paid, or maybe you are paying them. It's sometimes seen as a marketing expense. You may not know this, but some companies actually pay for the privilege of being in a subscription box. What are the rules around promotion? All of that needs to be in a really clear agreement. So if you're collaborating, again, even if it's very friendly, even if you think, well, this is just my friend, we're just doing a little one-off thing, just put it in writing. Even if, I've always got a handy legal pad here next to me. Even if you're just writing it down or putting it in a Google Doc and you both print it and sign it, we want to be very, very clear, especially if it's with a friend. I find that sometimes these things when they go bad, if it's with a friend, it can go really bad, and we don't want you to see that for your e-commerce business. So if you are collaborating, make sure you're putting it in writing. All right, so some of the next things that you may want to think about as far as legal protections. If you are selling products, you are at a higher risk of something going wrong than maybe someone who's just a graphic designer working behind a computer. Because with products, let's say something breaks, or a candle explodes, or it hurts someone. You are at more of a risk of something going wrong when you're selling physical products. A necklace could strangle someone. I mean, there's all kinds. People do crazy things with products. So I want to encourage you to think maybe earlier than another type business might. I want you to think about forming an LLC or a corporation to protect you from things that could go wrong within your business, because there just is more risk for an e-commerce business of something going wrong with a product. So when we think about forming an LLC or a corporation, the reason we do that, we are kind of building a fence around our business. So anything that goes wrong within the business, so let's say, again, a candle explodes and someone gets hurt and you get sued, your business gets sued. We don't want that person who sued you to be able to get at your personal car, your personal bank account, your personal home, and take that from you as a result of that lawsuit. We want to keep whatever went wrong in the business confined to whatever the business owns. So your business has bank accounts, your business may have some assets, and in an e-commerce business, you may have inventory. You may have some equipment that you use if you're producing goods yourself. So there may be more physical assets in an e-commerce business. But if something goes wrong and you get sued, that's all that they can get at if you have an LLC or a corporation and you're doing things the right way. They cannot get to your personal bank account. They can't get to your personal car, your personal home. And so with setting up an LLC or a corporation, that's going to give you that extra protection. It's going to help you sleep better at night, knowing that if something goes wrong with one of your products and you do get sued, you've got that extra level of protection. Now, the third thing I want you to think about, this is kind of the flip side to having an LLC or a corporation, is insurance. So again, because your risk is a little bit higher when you're selling products, you could be sued for what's called product liability. So that's where something goes wrong with your product. They will sue kind of everyone in the whole supply chain. So even if, let's say, you are buying a product from another manufacturer, you didn't even make the product yourself, but you're selling it, everyone in that whole chain is going to be sued if someone gets hurt from that product. And so that's going to include you as a seller. So what the insurance will do is it will actually pay out a claim if you get sued. It will hire a lawyer for you, which is usually the most expensive part of being sued. So it will give you a lot of extra protection. The LLC, really all it's doing, again, it's that building that fence around your business. But if you do get sued, it's not going to actually pay out a claim. An LLC is just going to confine kind of what they can get at. The insurance will actually pay out the claim. It will actually pay to hire a lawyer. So that insurance is a really important piece. And I recommend that you think about that early, again, with forming an LLC or a corporation for your business. And for this, I recommend that you meet with someone locally, that you can explain your business, tell them what kinds of things you're selling so that they can evaluate the risk and make sure that you are getting the right kind of coverage so that you are protected in the right ways. Insurance cost is going to vary, so it may be something that you want to investigate early, and then if you're hardly selling anything, you may want to, come back and pull the trigger and get that coverage when you actually, kind of get up and running and you're selling more. But I really think it's something you should look at sooner rather than later. All right. If you are an e-commerce business, let's say you maybe start on Etsy or another third-party platform, but at some point you are probably going to have your own website, your own storefront. Maybe it's on Shopify, maybe it's Squarespace, whatever platform you're using. There's two things that I want you to think about on your website as far as legal documents. The first one is required by law, and that is your privacy policy. And what this does is it just tells people who are giving you their information. And if you're selling products through your website, you're getting people's information. You're getting their name, probably their email address, and their shipping address, if nothing else. You may also be getting other information from them. But so your privacy policy is required. You have to tell people what you're going to do with that information after they give it to you. Are you going to use it for marketing? Are you going to sell it to somebody else? The law doesn't require, in the United States, there's no requirements around what you can do with that information, but you have to tell people what you're going to do with it. You have to be honest with them. So that privacy policy is required. It's required by state law, but there's 3 states in the United States. California is the one we hear about the most. But if you are an e-commerce company, my guess is you are selling nationwide. So this is going to, everybody, no matter where you're located, you are going to be required to comply with this law. This also applies to you even if you have a website that is not selling yet, but is more of just kind of a bulletin board, directing people to the other platforms where you may be selling. Maybe it's just more of a catalog, or if you're a wholesale business, maybe it just kind of shows your products, but people can't actually order from you. You still are required to have a privacy policy if you are, let's say, letting people sign up for your newsletter, or if you have a contact us form. If you are collecting information at all, that privacy policy is still going to be required. So it's kind of a set it and forget it. It is not something that I suggest you draft on your own. We do sell a template for that, and that's what I recommend because there are all kinds of specific requirements about what you have to include, and you want to make sure you do it the right way. So I do recommend that you just get a template, fill it out, put it on your website, and you will not have to think about it again until, if there's a big change in our privacy laws. The other thing that I recommend you think about on your website, it's not required, but it's a good idea, is terms and conditions. So this basically puts people on notice that you own the rights to maybe the images or the graphics on your website if you have blog posts. And you can kind of tell people what they are and are not allowed to do with any of your content. If you allow people to comment on your website, maybe on blog posts, or if you have any other interactive features, you can also have rules and guidelines around that. It is often kind of a holding place for disclaimers and other legal notices that you may want to include on your website. That would be a great place to put your return policy also, or any kind of other terms and conditions that you have around purchases. It's just kind of a good holding place for all the miscellaneous policies, rules, notices that you want to include on your website. So not required, but a good idea is your website terms and conditions. Now, I want to close out by talking about intellectual property a little bit because you guys know my background is I was a copyright lawyer by training. We now at our law firm do a ton of trademark and copyright work. So as I mentioned with Vivian Kay, our guest on next week's episode, she has registered a trademark for a phrase that she has put on products. So when we think about trademarks, there's a lot of confusion between trademarks and copyrights. Trademarks are going to protect things that we think of as a brand. So it might be your company name or your logo. It could be a tagline, like I would say, what would Chad do? That's more of kind of a tagline or a slogan. But it can also include product names. So we work with a stationery company called E. Francis. They have a very popular line of products called Little Notes. And so they worked with us to register the trademark for that product. We'll include a link in the show notes. It's a really, really cute product. But so it could be any of those things could be a trademark. So as you're growing your business, again, this is not a day one thing to think about. But if you do have something catchy, or if you do think that your company name is unique or your logo is something you want to protect, I encourage you to go ahead and use that TM symbol from day one. So you can add that even if your trademark is not registered. As soon as you're using a trademark in your business, congratulations, you have trademark protection. And then if you register it with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, you can use that R in a circle. And as your business grows, you may start to identify things that are more precious to your business and that you would be upset if you saw other people copying or other people using, or maybe confusing your customers because they couldn't tell which product was yours and which product was someone else's. At that point, it's time to look at registering with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. It's going to give you an extra level of protection. It is expensive. It's going to cost you probably a few $1,000s, and it takes about a year. So that's why I don't recommend that you do it right away, but kind of keep your eye out in your business. With an e-commerce business, we do see more things that may need to be a registered trademark than, say, a coaching business or a course business. If you have a registered trademark, you also have better options to shut people down or to stop copycats, especially if they're on Amazon or Etsy. You can file a simple takedown notice if you have a registered trademark, and they will just take it down like that. It's very, very easy and simple. So I highly recommend that when you do start seeing products or your company name or other things that you might see being copied, and you want to be able to stop that. Now, the other type of intellectual property I want to talk to you about is copyrights. So copyrights are going to protect your creative work. Think about, I mentioned the drawing of the gnome earlier with Almanac Supply Co. We'll include a link to that as well. It's very, very cute. That would be a copyrighted work. So it's a creative work. So when you think about copyrights, think about movies, music, books, photographs, graphic designs. It's going to protect more things that we think of as creative works, not so much slogans, names, that kind of thing. A poem, your blog posts, the photographs on your website, all of those kinds of things, designs that you may put on your product. Your logo may even qualify as a copyright if it is creative enough. Can't just be something very simple like a square. But if there are some artistic elements to it, it could be protected by copyright as well. So for copyrights, kind of similar to what I talked about with your trademarks, registration is not required from day one. You can put a copyright notice. You do have automatic copyright protection in the United States just from, it can't be an idea. It has to be out of your head and onto paper or a computer file or some sort of product. But as soon as it is on something tangible or digital, you do have automatic protection. So you might want to start including that copyright notice, that C in a circle, plus the year, plus the name of your company on your website, on your product listings. It's kind of burdensome to put it on your actual products, so I don't know about that, but you might start to think about where can you put it to put people on notice that, yes, I am claiming the copyright in this creative work, and you might put something like all rights reserved or no use without prior permission, something kind of telling people, hey, this is mine, I'm claiming it, you can't use it without my permission. As you maybe find products that are becoming more popular or designs, or maybe it is for your logo, something you're using a lot and you don't want to be copied. At that point, you may want to think about registering it with the U.S. Copyright Office. Similar to our trademark registration, but a little different. It's not nearly as expensive. You can probably do it on your own. With trademarks, I highly recommend working with a lawyer because the process is very tricky. Copyright, it's much simpler. The filing fee right now, I'm recording this in 2020, is $65 per work. So, if you're registering 100 works, that adds up. But if it's just one or two, it's really not very expensive. And the application is pretty straightforward. So you are able to probably fill that out yourself. You may want to check with a lawyer if it's something very valuable to your business and you want to make absolutely sure you have everything correct. But for a lot of businesses, they can register their own copyrights, no problem. That is required before you can file a lawsuit. So if you think you have a design that you may have to go after people for copying, it makes sense to go ahead and register that copyright so you're ready to go when and if that happens. Now, the last thing I want to touch on before I close out, this is my last topic for you e-commerce shop owners, is to make sure you're not infringing anyone else's work. So this really hits both copyrights and trademarks, but I see this a lot with my sellers on Etsy, my sellers on Amazon, is they borrow, they try to hop on trends, which is great, but you have to be careful. If you are using a photograph that you didn't create on a product, you have to ask permission or you're infringing. Or if you see a design that's really cute and you redraw it, that could be copyright infringement. So I want you to be careful. I want you to focus on doing things that you have come up with yourself that are really unique and original. That is always going to keep you in the clear when it comes to copyright. The second you start borrowing and maybe doing some parody or, doing fan art, using other people's, using movie names or popular sayings, popular phrases, you may start to get into an area where someone else has already kind of put their flag in the ground and owns the rights to that. And now we're in much more of a gray area. And it may be okay, but you may have to talk with a lawyer, do a little research, make sure that you're on the right side of things, or you could find yourself receiving a cease and desist letter from a movie studio or from another big company that is claiming the rights to what you're using. So again, it may be okay, but you're gonna have to do a little more due diligence. So if you want kind of the easiest, cleanest thing to do, it's to just come up with things out of your own brain, put them on your products, stick with your own creative, unique designs and products. Not saying it can't be done, but it adds a layer of complexity. So you may want to kind of wait until your business is a little more established and you can form a relationship with a lawyer to go over, the pros and cons to using other people's work in your products, in your business. All right, I hope this was helpful. As I mentioned at the beginning, go to awbfirm.com/podcast149. That's the show notes for this episode. We'll include a link as well. So if you're listening on a podcast app, you just click on that link and go get the 10-step checklist that we have for getting your business legally protected. It is, as I mentioned, the resource we still use with our own one-on-one clients. It is hugely valuable and helpful. And tune in next week. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, wherever you're listening or watching this. And make sure you do not miss my interview with Vivian Kay, founder of Kinky Curly Yaki. She's got over $1 million annual revenue e-commerce business. And you will really, really enjoy my conversation about how she's built that, how she's built multiple businesses, and some of the legal issues that she has had along the way. All right, I will talk to you guys again soon. Have a great one.